Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today is the start of the Women's Euros, and I know the whole House will wish the Lionesses the very best of luck in bringing football home. Mr. Speaker, it's also... Mr. Speaker, it's also been 40 years since the death of Terence Higgins. Terence worked at Hansard by day and Heaven by night before he sadly died of AIDS. The Labour Party and the Terence Higgins Trust are committed to ending new cases of HIV by 2030. Together we can. Mr. Speaker, last week a government minister was accused of sexually assaulting a young man. I want to quote the victim's account. He says, "He grabbed my arse and then he slowly moved his hand down in front of my groin. I froze." I accept that's not easy listening, but it's a reminder to all those propping up this Prime Minister just how serious the situation is. He knew the accused minister had previously committed predatory behaviour, but he promoted him to a position of power anyway. Why?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, that individual, the member for Tamworth, no longer has the Conservative whip. He no longer has a job. He is no longer, as soon as I was made aware of the allegation that he has just read out, Mr. Speaker, and the complaint that was made, he lost his status as a Conservative MP, and he is now the subject, Mr. Speaker, of an independent investigation to the Complaints and Grievances panel. And that is entirely right. And I want to say to him, Mr. Speaker, I want to say to him that I abhor bullying and abuse of power anywhere in Parliament, in this party or in any other party.
Keir Starmer.
None of that explains why he promoted him in the first place. And we've heard it all before. We know who he really is. Before he was found out, he's reported to have said he's handsy. That's the problem. Pincher by name, pincher by nature. Now, has the Prime Minister ever said words to that effect? And I'm not asking for bluster and half-truth. We've all had enough of that. Yes or no?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'm not going to trivialise what happened. Yes, Mr. Speaker. Yes, Mr. Speaker. I'm not, because the very serious complaints have been raised against the member for Tamworth, and they're now being investigated, Mr. Speaker. It is true. It is true that a complaint was raised when he was in the Foreign Office, and the matter was resolved. It's absolutely true. It's absolutely true, Mr. Speaker, that it was raised with me. I greatly regret that he continued in office, and I've said that. I have said that before, Mr. Speaker. I have said that before, Mr. Speaker. But it is now the subject of an independent investigation, and that is the right thing, Mr. Speaker. And frankly, I think the people of this country would like also to hear. They would like also to hear about other jobs that are held by people in this country, not least the 500,000 people we got off welfare into work in the last 6 months alone, Mr. Speaker. Those are things that are making differences to the lives of people up and down the country, and I'm proud of it.
Keir Starmer.
No one's cheering that.
No denial. And he says the matter was resolved when he means it was upheld. Exactly. And they're all sitting there as if this is normal behaviour. Exactly. When that young man reported his attack to a government whip, she asked him if he was gay. When he said that he was, she replied, "That doesn't make it straightforward." That comment will sicken anyone who's experienced sexual assault and then be made to feel like they somehow asked for it, or who worry that prejudice means their complaint won't be taken seriously. Will he apologise for those disgraceful comments on behalf of his government?
Mr. Speaker, I've already said that I regret very much that the member for Tamworth continued to hold office after the complaint was made against him in the Foreign Office, and it was resolved in the Foreign Office. His apology was accepted, but clearly that was not enough. And in hindsight, Mr. Speaker, I should have realised that he would not change. However, when it came to the Friday of last week, and when I was given the information that he's read out about the complaint that was made against the honourable member, I acted immediately, Mr. Speaker, and I took the whip away from him. And we will not tolerate that kind of behaviour in this or any other party, Mr. Speaker. And what we also want to do is to help people up and down the country with the things that also matter to them, like cutting their taxes, Mr. Speaker, by £330 this year, which is what we're doing.
Keir Starmer.
Doesn't that just sum him up? Awful behaviour, unacceptable in any walk of life. It's there for all to see, but he ignores it. It was the same when his ally was on the take from the lobbyists. It was the same when his Home Secretary was bullying staff. It was the same when taxpayers' money was being abused. And it was the same when he and his mates parted their way through lockdown. Anyone quitting now, after defending all that, hasn't got a shred of integrity. Mr. Speaker, isn't this the first recorded case of the sinking ships fleeing the rat?
Mr. Speaker, look, he talks about. He should hear what his lot say about him, Mr. Speaker. He talks about integrity. He wanted to install the member for Islington North into number 10, Mr. Speaker. That's what he wanted to do. Imagine what our country and what the world will be like now. He talks about integrity. He voted 48 times to overturn the will of the British people and take us back into the European Union. And by the way, listening to his muddled speech the other day, that is exactly what he would do again. Mr. Speaker, he talks about integrity, but Mr. Speaker, he has voted time and time again against sanctions on criminals that would put them behind bars. This is the government that is tough on... I'm sorry, he talks about integrity. He is himself facing a criminal investigation, Mr. Speaker, which he asked me to resign.
Keir Starmer.
What a pathetic spectacle. The dying act of his political career is to parrot that nonsense. And as for those who are left, only in office because no one else is prepared to debase themselves any longer, the charge of the lightweight brigade. Some self-respect. Mr. Speaker, for a week, he's had them defending his decision to promote a sexual predator. Every day, the lines he's forced them to take have been untrue. First, that he was unaware of any allegation. Untrue. Then, he was unaware of any specific allegation. Untrue. Then he was unaware of any serious specific allegation. And now he wants them to go out and say that he simply forgot that his whip was a sexual predator. Anyone with anything about them would be long gone from his front bench. In the middle of a crisis, doesn't the country deserve better than a Z-list cast of nodding dogs?
Well, Mr. Speaker, it's exactly when times are tough and when the country faces pressures on the economy and pressures on their budgets, Mr. Speaker, and when we have the biggest war in Europe for 80 years, Mr. Speaker, that is exactly the moment that you'd expect a government to continue with its work, not to walk away, Mr. Speaker, and to get on with our job and to focus on the things that matter to the people of this country. And so we're not only cutting taxes today, Mr. Speaker, we're putting £1,200 into every one of the 8 million most vulnerable households in the country, Mr. Speaker, thanks to the strength of our economy and thanks to the decisions that we took, Mr. Speaker, which he opposed at the time.
Keir Starmer.
The only thing he's delivering is chaos. I started this session with a quote from the young victim in all this, how he froze when he was attacked. When I was prosecuting rapists, I heard that from victims all the time. Victims said they froze because it's not about sex, it's about power. And the power the disgraced government minister had was handed to him by that Prime Minister. And he's only in power because he's been propped up for months by a corrupted party defending the indefensible. So it's no longer a case about swapping the person at the top. Isn't it clear? The only way the country can get the fresh start it deserves is by getting rid of the lot of them.
Mr. Speaker, the difference between this.
We've got to get through Prime Minister's questions. Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the difference between this government and that opposition is we have a plan and they do not. We're getting on. They want to focus on this type of issue, Mr. Speaker. We're going to get on with our jobs. We're going to control prices, Mr. Speaker, by not giving in to the union barons. They're paid by the union barons, and they're proud of it. We were the first European country to arm the Ukrainians, Mr. Speaker. I'm proud of that. And those guys, Mr. Speaker, the party opposite, not only do they want to put Mr. Corbyn into number 10, the member for Islington North, but 8 of them, including the shadow foreign secretary, the shadow deputy leader, and 6 others, voted to get rid of our independent nuclear deterrent, Mr. Speaker. Today we are cutting taxes, we're helping 500,000 people into work, and thanks to the strength of our economy, we're helping people up and down the country, and we are going to continue to deliver on the mandate I was given.